Today I figured I would go through the startup mission for the Aviojet C-101. This is the EB or Echo Bravo version. I don't know what it is about this airplane, but I kind of like it. It's generally pretty simple, and one of the things is that it's all in the US standard gauges. Normally I fly all sorts of different aircraft, and as far as trainer jets, I was messing around with the Albatross, which I also like very much, but this one's in the English gauge realm, even though the cockpit can be in Spanish. If you speak Spanish, I don't, unfortunately, so I don't understand what all the different things are. I do better with Cyrillic, honestly. But I figured, what the heck, I'm gonna run this particular mission for startup. It is a little bugged, and I hope that it goes well. I always have a problem with the Aileron roll check, but it's a good mission. If you have this module, go through it a couple times, read the manual, and the combination of the two, you'll get kind of a good understanding of the different systems and what you're actually checking. But it is a good trainer aircraft.
Ground procedures. Startup mission. Okay, everything checks out with the exterior inspection. In this mission, we'll learn to perform the internal inspection and the before, during, and after startup procedures. Once you gain fluency with these and understand the reason for each step, you'll be ready to taxi the airplane. It is important that you review the manual and understand the various systems of the airplane, or it will be difficult for you to understand everything that I'm going to explain to you here. In addition, I suggest that you have a knee board handy with written procedures so you can follow the checklist with me. Let's go.
So basically they're saying he's done the outside inspection, but in DCS that's really not necessary, and you can't really do it anyway. But there it is, he did it supposedly, so here we are. Last time I did a video with this jet, I made a comment about the nav lights being on. Apparently that's a bug, they know about it, and it's going to get fixed. There's no power to the aircraft right now, but the lights are on, and I was told that that was a bug and that it was reported.
Interior inspection procedure. This cockpit preparation procedure is performed from left to right in a clockwise direction. So we'll start from the left console after first checking these 3 steps.
This is a little tedious.
Step 1, ejection seat pins inserted.
There's the ejection seat pin, and last time I said I didn't know whether it would come out or not, and somebody told me that it will. You just have to rotate the mouse or actually just pull it out. Put it back in. A little touching. There it is. Okay, so it's in.
Step 2. Ejection sequence valve in the rear cabin is set as required. Now note that this is not a task for you. This occurs in the rear cabin.
Okay, so we're in the rear cabin. That ejection seat switch is right there, and it's on by default. Also really kind of cool is the map case, and there's one in the front cockpit too. Let's go back. See? Just kind of ambient stuff.
Step 3. Leg restraints, survival kit, harnesses, and pedals are adjusted. Once this is done, we'll make a clockwise scan and work our way through the following panels.
By the way, he's going to ask us to adjust our rudder pedals again.
Now on to the left console. Note the circuit breakers panel. Most of the aircraft's breakers or circuit breakers are in the circuit breakers panel. Circuit breakers, when heated due to excess current, pop out, isolating the circuit from the electrical system and leaving a white band visible. Pressing the breaker once it is cooled will reconnect the system. The breakers panel has labels to show what systems depend on each breaker and which bus they are connected to. I recommend that you know by heart the position of the breakers for at least the essential equipment connected to the main bus, as well as where the circuit breakers for the landing gear and trim are, so that in case of an emergency, you can locate them quickly.
What he was talking about is you can put them up and down. You see that white line. If you can see that white line, then it's tripped. I don't know if they actually tripped, to be honest.
Step 4. Breakers. All in.
They're all in by default.
Next, the emergency control unit. In an emergency, this is used to manage the aircraft's trim. We may also disconnect the hydraulic system assistance to control roll, or retract the speed brake in the event of hydraulic failure. Step 5. Check the emergency pitch trim guard. Ensure that it is in. This guard turns 90 degrees. When rotated 90 degrees, this both releases the emergency trim switch and opens the normal trim electrical circuit, preventing it from continuing to send faulty signals. Now note that if the trim tone breaker is in, the interaction between the air brake and trim electrical circuits is also switched off. Step 6. Ensure that the emergency trim breaker is in. This breaker protects the trimming electrical circuit, along with the main breaker in the breaker panel labeled COM pins. Step 7. The throttle. Check its full range of travel. Take it out of stop, advance it fully forward, then bring it back and leave it in stop. Now to the engine control panel. With this, we will control engine start and ignition. In addition, it will let us use GPU current.
This is the GPU current. Corey, it'll turn on when we connect electrical power, and when we turn it on, we'll have an on symbol too.
Step 8. Ensure that your ignition is set to off.
Middle is off, down is continuous. You use that for takeoff and landing, and also for adverse weather conditions.
Step 9. Ensure that the starter is normal.
Normal is aft.
Step 10. Ensure that the GPU is on. We'll have a GPU connected to the airplane and ready to provide power later on when you press the Corey. A Corey is a button that acts as a switch, and to know whether it's connected or not, note the illuminated inscription. The name Corey comes from its creator, Boris Corey.
What's kind of cool about this module,
Chief, turn on the ground power.
is they actually connect a GPU unit
Copy.
or generator.
Ground power is now on.
Now on to the fuel panel. This allows us to manage the airplane's fuel.
You'll notice that the GPU light is on now because it's receiving power from it. We don't have it turned into the system, but it is indicating that it's hooked up.
Step 11. Check the pumps in the front cabin and ensure they are set to off.
Middle is off. Forward is automatic. He says OT, but it's automatic, and aft is manual.
Now this completes our inspection of the left console. Now on to the left panel. Step 12. Landing lights. In.
Up, the landing lights are in and off.
Step 13. Stall warning. On.
That's your stall warning. By default, it's on.
Step 14. Parking brake. Set.
Pulled out, the parking brake is set.
Now on to the central console. Step 15. Accelerometer reset to 1G. Step 16. Uhf Radio to off.
Another cool thing is this. You can use under here to set your preset channels as well. I'm not going to do that now.
Step 17. Uhf Antennas to OT. The Uhf Radio has two antennas above and below the fuselage. These antennas are also shared with the IFF equipment.
Up is for the upper antenna, down is for the lower antenna, and middle is automatic.
Step 18. Tarson Encompass mode. This allows synchronizing the gyroscopic indication with the magnetic flux valve in the right wing.
The Tarson is your INS system, and it's tied into your HSI. They wanted Encompass mode, which is up, obviously.
Step 19. Set the altimeter to the airfield elevation. It will be adjusted later with QNH. Step 20. Set the clock. Now notice it's mechanical, not an electrical clock.
I have it in my DCS settings to set the clock on mission start, so it's already set. But here's your chronograph. Start, stop, reset.
Step 21. Emergency horizon locked.
It's caged.
Step 22. IFF off.
This is your IFF panel here. IFF really isn't implemented in DCS, but if you want to play with it, there it is.
Now let's move to the right panel. Check that the electrical system is disconnected in the following manner. Step 23. The inverter set to off.
Here's
The
your
inverter converts DC into AC for equipment like the Tarson or navigation systems.
Up is on, down is standby.
Step 24. Ensure that the generator is set to off. The generator is the primary source of electrical power and is driven by the engine while it's running.
Off is middle, down is reset. It's spring loaded. It'll come back, and up is on.
Step 25. DC bus tie off. The current distribution is done through two main buses, a primary and a secondary. To put it another way, each bus is simply a line that provides power to a group of equipment. Leaving the switch off ensures that the primary and secondary bus will be disconnected from each other. Step 26. Batteries off. The two batteries are a secondary source of energy, especially when the aircraft is not powered by the generator or the GPU, either while on the ground before start or due to an engine stop in flight. In the latter case, the batteries would normally provide enough power for about 30 minutes after turning off all non-essential equipment.
These two Corys are your two different batteries, by the way.
Next, let's flow to the right console. Now check out the oxygen panel. Step 27. The cabin altimeter displaying the airfield elevation. Once the airplane is pressurized and once we have connected the air conditioning system and are above 8,000 feet during flight, it should keep showing a cabin altitude of 8,000 feet as we climb until the aircraft reaches about 20,000 feet. Above that altitude, if we go on climbing, the system is no longer able to maintain a cabin altitude of 8,000 feet because the pressure difference between the outside and interior is too high. Let's go to the lighting panel. The lighting panel allows us to control both interior and exterior lighting. Step 28. Ensure that the interior lighting is set to off.
Before I do that, these are your switches on and off for your different audio channels. When they have these yellow boxes around them, it's hard to see, but you've got your intercom, UHF, VHF, hot mic, talk, mic, VOR, TACAN. Here's your volume knob for in general, and this is what he's going to call the biscuit. You've got intercom, UHF, and VHF, and that's how you choose what you're going to talk on. So those are off for now. This is your storm lighting. That's these. And this is your flood lighting. That'll turn these little red lights on, and you can actually kind of adjust them. There's one here too.
Step 29. Position light to bright. Now these are the wingtip green and red lights. A white light in the tail and 2 white silhouette lights. Step 30. Anti-collision light on. This light flashes red on the top of the plane's tail. Let's move to the VOR ILS MB control panel. From this panel we can tune VOR or ILS frequencies to receive from the appropriate beacons. Step 31. VOR off.
You rotate it on and off.
Next, we'll look at the TACAN control panel. We can receive signals from both TACAN stations on the ground and from other aircraft using the air-to-air mode. Step 32, TACAN off.
You got off, receive, transmit, receive, air-to-air, receive, air-to-air, I think transmit and receive. It's an off.
Step 33, oxygen valve lever open. Now I hope you've connected the oxygen lever as soon as you've put your mask on, or you won't be able to breathe. The plane has 4 oxygen bottles, 2 in the nose and 2 under the rear cabin seat, offering a total amount of 8.4 liters. Their pressure is 1800 psi, which is checked during the outside inspection. Now let's look at the VHF control panel. Step 34. VHF off.
Aft is off.
The VHF enables communication in the frequency range from 116 to 149.975 megahertz. Yeah, I've looked in the manual. Its main elements are a transceiver, the control unit itself, and the antenna. Step 35. The oxygen failure warning switch. Now these are both to be on. Now however, this switch is located in the rear cabin, so there's no need for you to do anything. But you should know the system provides a warning in the event that pressure drops below 45 psi in any of the cabins.
This is the switch he's talking about. Set it forward for both, and then if we're going to mess back here, we need to turn on the oxygen back here. Otherwise, we'll have an oxygen warning on the warning and panel up here when we go to start. It won't match up.
Now let's go to the intercom and audio control panel. Step 36. At the intercom, pull the potentiometers. In normal flight, we'll have raised at least the rotaries for the INT, UHF, VHF, hot mic, and hot mic talk. This means that we can listen to communications between the cockpits and with the radio equipment. Once raised, we'll adjust the volume by turning the rotary. We'll also leave the 6th position selector commonly known as the biscuit, in either VHF or UHF, depending upon the radio we want our voice to be transmitted through. You'll probably eventually make a mistake and transmit through the wrong radio. That's called a galetazo, a slap. Everyone does it. Now let's look at the air conditioning and pressurization panel. With this panel, we can control the cabin environment, both its pressurization and its temperature. Step 37, air conditioning set to off.
Middle's off.
Step 38, the automatic temperature control. If the automatic temperature control fails, we can switch to manual mode. This allows you to manually hold pressed the cold and hot switch so that you can directly open and close the bypass valve.
Auto.
Step 39, cabin airflow. When the flow is set to the windshield position, the tubes you see along the canopy edges blow air to remove condensation. Step 40, temperature selector to the 12 o'clock position, considering that the nose of your aircraft is your 12 o'clock. Step 41, emergency ventilation off. In case of an emergency, this opens a ram airflow system from the outside through an inlet in the nose. This will depressurize the cabin. Fantastic! It looks like our interior inspection has been completed. The before startup procedure. Step 1. Batteries to on. Reset the master warning. Reset the master caution. Step 2. We check the voltage for each battery separately, and each should be 24 volts. So disconnect the left battery, and the voltmeter should read greater than or equal to 24 volts. Connect back the left one, and disconnect the right one, and again the voltmeter should read greater than or equal to 24 volts. Now reconnect the right one, leaving both connected. Step 3. GPU on. This allows power to flow from the GPU. Now setting the GPU connection to on automatically disconnects the battery in the generator. Step 4. Essential bus transfer set to on. Now when on, the essential bus is connected to the secondary bus, which is then energized, and you will notice that we have intercom, among other things. We set it to off, it will be de-energized as it depends on the primary bus and is not receiving power. The essential bus, as the name suggests, supplies essential equipment that should not rely solely on a bus for safety reasons. Step 5. Set the DC bus tie to on. Now the secondary bus is connected to the primary bus. Since the secondary bus receives current from the GPU, the primary bus also receives current. Step 6. AC inverter to standby. Here we can check that the standby inverter is operational. You'll notice that the ADI, HSI, and RMI instruments jump as they stop receiving alternate current. Step 7. Ensure that the intercom is set to open. Now you can note that we already did this in the interior inspection. Step 8. Adjust your seat and pedals. The proper seating position is one that allows you to see the bulkhead flushed with the top of the fault light's upper frame. Also, the pitot tube is just seen above the nose. Step 9. the ignition lamp. Press and check it. You will see that when it's pressed, it's turned on. Now this doesn't indicate that the ignition is functioning, it's just to check the bulb. All bulbs are checked in the same way, by pressing them. If you turn them, you can adjust the intensity of the lights. Step 10. Ensure that the computer is set to on. When the computer is on, the Cori is off.
If you push it, it'll turn it off and go into manual mode.
Step 11. Fuel panel. Check. The aircraft is equipped with a main fuel tank fuselage, which is located just behind the rear cabin. This tank provides fuel directly to the engine through the submerged electric pump while the fuel valve is open. Additionally, the engine has its own mechanical fuel pump that allows autonomous operation below 25,000 feet. Wing fuel tanks. There's a center tank, a left outer wing tank, and a right outer wing tank. The center tank has 2 transfer pumps, and the left outer and right outer tanks have 1 each. To verify the correct operation of the fuel system, follow these steps. Step A. Fuel quantity switch. Press. FUS indication goes off and the gauge shows FUS plus center wing tank. B. Verify each transfer pump in each wing tank has fuel. You can tell that if it shows a green indication. We should do this for each one separately. Pump. Aught. FUS indication goes off, gauge shows FUS plus center wing tank, and there's an indication of transfer pressure. Pump. Off. FUS indication goes on, gauge shows FUS, and there is no transfer pressure indication. Pump. Man. It's got the same indications as in AUT. Pump off. Step 12. Transfer pumps with fuel set to aught. Only connect those pumps in tanks with green indications, showing the presence of fuel. The only difference between aught and man is that when the fuel runs out, if the pump is in aught, it'll turn off. If it's not, it will continue on, and this could damage the pump as it runs dry. Anyway, we have that option in case the automatic mode fails. Step 13. Fuel quantity selector in FUS. Cori indication is on. Step 14. Submerged pump on. Cori off. Step 15. Fuel valve to open. Cori off. LAV comb module in the warning caution panel also goes off. Step 16, the triple test. This is a stall warning test, so set the switch to the assist position.
Which is
Avis heard caution panel light comes on. Now after 8 seconds, the pedal starts to vibrate, and after 10 seconds, the caution panel light goes out. Now we can take the switch out of assist position and put it in trans position to verify that the transmission between the AOA probe and the system is correct. If it is, the stall warning lights again. We leave it in neutral position. fuel flow meter. Keep it pressed until the totalizer shows 10. This will take about 30 seconds. The indication of the flow meter will be 1,200 pounds per hour. We reset the totalizer. Press the fire warning, checking that the fire light, the red module, and an acoustic warning come on. Step 17. Ensure that the voltmeter checks out at 28 volts. Since it's connected to the GPU and the DC bus tie, the voltmeter reads the voltage of the primary bus, which in this case should be 28 volts. Step 18. The warning caution panel. Dim it, bright it, and test it. Step 19. The inverter to normal. Now set it like this. This way, if we have an inverter failure, we will get a warning in the warning caution panel. If we left it in standby and it failed, there would be no warning. Congratulations! The before startup procedure has been completed. Startup procedure. We're ready to start up. Now during the startup, the pilot must be aware of how engine parameters vary, so that in the case of an emergency, they can quickly interrupt the startup and make an emergency exit. That's why we still have the canopy partially or fully open. Remember the possible emergencies that we must be prepared for consideration of on the checklist. Startup abort, engine fire, or overheating on ground, and emergency exit. If there were a fire in the startup, the mechanic would indicate it with the sign of a line 8. Now note the following conditions that must be met to continue with the startup. You must have 4 red, 1 amber, ITT below 200, and 28 volts.
This is our N1, this is our ITT, this is our N2. Of course, that's your voltage meter. Notice how I said there's 4 red and 1 amber. If we went back in the cockpit and we turned that off, you'll notice that we have, where is it? Oxygen pressure warning also.
Check to ensure that the area is free. Scan from left to right, checking that there are no people or objects which can be ingested by the engine. We now signal the mechanic to begin the startup. Before continuing, I must tell you that once you press the starter, everything will happen very fast. So before you do so, let's go over what you'll see. After you push the start switch, an electric motor will rotate the high pressure shaft and both spark plugs ignition will come on. You will see the N2 RPM rising rapidly, and when it reaches a value of 10%, you will move the throttle lever slightly above idle, then bring it straight back to idle. Fuel flow is now enabled. In the combustion chambers, spark plugs will ignite the fuel and the low pressure turbine will start rotating its shaft, generating N1 indication before 20% N2. You should also see ITT temperature start increasing within 10 seconds, and as the engine starts moving, it will also spin the oil pressure pump. Fuel flow must be about 200 pounds per hour, and hydraulic pressure have reached the green arc at around 3,000 psi, as the accessory box is driven by the high pressure shaft. Once the engine is running above 50% N2, the generator control and regulation unit, in combination with the engine computer, will cause the automatic cutout of the startup sequence. And once you understand the sequence, let's start burning some kerosene. Start. Press and hold for 2 seconds. Release. The ignition lamp comes on. The voltage is equal to or higher than 15 volts. We have 10% N2, throttle to idle. We quickly see N1 indication before 20% N2. ITT and oil pressure rise within 10 seconds. Fuel flow meter is stabilized at 200 pounds per hour. The hydraulic pressure turns green at 3000 psi. At 50% N2, the startup sequence stops, switching off the ignition lamp. Parameters should be stabilized with N1 between 29 to 33% and N2 between 58 and 71%. We have now completed the startup sequence. It is important that you review the manual to see under what conditions, in addition to the ones seen above, we must abort the startup. The after startup procedure. Step 1. Turn the GPU off, as the generator can now feed the electrical system. Step 2. The GPU. Signal to the mechanic to unplug the GPU.
Chief, turn off the ground power. Copy. Ground power is now on.
Step 3. Generator. Reset it and let it back on. The XGEN CC red module goes off. Step 4. Generator test. Note that when simulating these failures, the XGen red module lights as well as the master caution. You will also see the consequent drop in voltage. Perform the ground fault test.
Oops, that's down there.
Then reset the generator. Perform the over voltage test. Then reset the generator. Now connect the navigation and communication equipment. UHF on. VOR on. TACAN on. VHF on. Standby artificial horizon uncaged. IFF standby. Check to ensure that the hydraulic is in the green range of 3000 psi. The following sequence is done in coordination with the mechanic if available. Air brake, checked and in. In indication is displayed. Flaps, set to down and then set to takeoff. Bank left. Notice how the ailerons move visually. Bank right, same thing.
And this is where it's bugged that I can never get it past. This is where I can never get it past in the mission. For whatever reason. Never gets past that. But then it's going to ask us to do an elevator check, rudder check. Basically, we're going to roll all our different surfaces, make sure they work. And at this point, just going to start here. Air brakes, flaps, set pitot heat on. We don't need it on, but it's right there. Stall warning is already on. It's right there. The internal and external lights we already set. Although I think I'm gonna. Come on. There we go. Turn those on a bit. We're going to close and lock the canopy. We're going to, at this point, we're going to turn the air conditioning to reset. Oops, reset, and then back on. Takeoff trim. We want it down a little bit. About there. We already did a flight control check. I'm going to pull the ejection pin. The parking brake we're going to release. And we're going to get ready to taxi. And just for kicks and giggles,
Airfield 1-1. Request startup.
we're already started up.
Airfield 1-1. Batumi, cleared for startup. Batumi, Airfield 1-1. Request taxi to runway. Airfield 1-1. Batumi, cleared a taxi to runway 31.
Now, since this is set to compass, technically we should subtract 6. Okay. Landing lights. That's before you take off. But for taxi, we're going to make sure that our lights are in taxi. Our lights are good. Our takeoff flaps are set. And we steer with toe brakes. We could do an intersection takeoff, but I'm not going to.
Batumi, Enfield 1-1. Request takeoff.
Technically, I'm not supposed to cross that line, but I think that they're not going to give me takeoff clearance until I get up here.
Batumi, Enfield 1-1, request takeoff.
Enfield 1-1. Batumi, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 29.89.
Alright. Landing lights on, flaps take off. Flaps are in takeoff. Landing lights on. Hold the brakes. Run up the engine, make sure the brakes hold for a little bit. Release the brakes, continue to throttle up. Our gauges are in the green. Our speed's alive. And a little after 100 knots is when we're going to rotate. Alright, rotate. Climbing, gear up, flaps up. We're going to have to trim those down a bit. Landing lights in. External lights we already set. Alright, now runway 13, 110.3. I'm going to fly out a ways. Notice that's not quite correct, and I don't know if it's because of the gyro setting or even if it works. But it's 130. What I can do is set VOR and the tack in, but we set the ILS we're about 5,000 almost feet, well 4,500. Now the trim, you'll hear whenever I trim it, you hear that? This little breaker switch here, we'll turn that off. See? We're gonna turn back around and go land with the ILS. We've got it set to nav and VOR. Pull the throttle back. I don't want to go much faster than 200 knots. And it's going to scream at me to put down my gear because we're under 200 knots. I'm just going to put my gear down. Turn our landing lights on. External lights are set. Let's set our first notch of flaps. It's going to pitch down. I'm going to add a little throttle. But I'm losing altitude on purpose because we're a little high. And since we're still below 150, we're going to put our landing flaps in. Have to add a little more throttle, trim, we are picking up the ILS signal, and you'll notice we're too high still. Still not quite right. Now normally with the velocity there, vertical velocity in the American system, when you're getting your glide slope, you want about 500 feet a minute, about approximately. In the Russian jets it's more like 3 meters per second, because they do it by meters per second as opposed to feet per minute. But since we're high, we're going to drop just under 1,000, and hopefully we're still way too high, so we need to go a little further than that. So we got 1 red and 3 white. Keep it below 500 feet a minute. There we go. We've got 2 white and 2 red. So we want to keep it around 500 feet per minute. And slow it down and keep our nose up to slow us down. We're a little low. I wonder if I banged my tail. Well, that wasn't a good landing, but you guys catch the drift. I'm not sure I smashed the tail. That might have just been my main gear hitting hard, because I was going a little too slow for my flare.
Airfield 1-1. Taxi to parking area.
Taxi lights on. Put our flaps up. Well, geez, when I did that ILS landing in the fog, I landed better than I just did. I'm not going to go through the whole shutdown procedure because this video is probably already long enough. Just wish it wasn't bugged. Well, hope I didn't bore you all to death.